Hello. In this lecture, I'm going to talk about the history of the theater, and it's not exactly what you might think. Instead of focusing on a specific object or genre, we're going to look at how space, time, and technology was designed to allow for an immersive experience. Again, not an exhaustive history, but rather human-centered design highlights along the way. So starting in the 6th to 4th century BC, we have the ancient Greek theater. The oldest theater is that of Dionysus on the south slope of the Acropolis of Athens, which was first built in the 6th century, seen on the left here, and then a more modern rendering on the right. Some features to note. There's a large open space with stepped seating and a semicircular arrangement which allowed more people to see and hear the spectacle along with a better view. Now, most of the seating here was made of stone and wood. This held about 15,000 people, and people went to enjoy watching the dramas play out. Aside from the throne-like seating in the front row, yes, made of stone, there wasn't a hierarchy of attendees in terms of social status. According to 5th to 4th century Greek pottery decoration, the stage was built around 1 meter above the ground and had steps at the front. Actors performed on the stage, which had an entrance on the left and right sides, and from a single central doorway in the scenery behind, usually made to resemble a temple, palace, or cave. As you can see here on the right, it looks more like a palace. As you can also see on the right, there were monumental entrances that were built on the sides of the stage for the public to enter. So they're entering right at the stage instead of behind where the seating is. Greek architects liked to site their theaters in such places that gave the audience a spectacular view, not just of the actors on stage, but also the landscape behind and forward. Moving ahead about 1500 years, we leave Rome and we head over to London to Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. This was made entirely from wood with a thatched roof. The Globe Theatre opened in 1599 and burnt down in 1614 after a live cannon that was used for special effect caught the roof on fire. Only one can only imagine if the spectators thought it was just part of the show. And I kind of wonder if they finished the act before they evacuated. It was rebuilt in 1614 and then was closed down in 1642. What you see now in London and on screen is a reconstruction that was completed in 1994. We see the circular theme and the tiered seating and elevated stage from the Greek theater to enhance the acoustics and viewing of the plays on stage. We also see that there's a roof over the seating. Shakespeare's Globe Theatre can hold 2,000 to 3,000 people. There's a small room behind the stage for props and actor preparation area. There's no lighting at the Globe Theatre. The open air environment provided the light. Same thing as the Greek theaters. One other note, the gentlemen's boxes and lords' rooms run along the middle gallery on either side of the stage. So the second story there. For the time period, being seen and admired at the theater was more important than the view of the performance. The yard, the area that doesn't have a roof, was the cheapest place to be. And from here, the groundlings, that's what you called people who stood there or stood in the yard, the groundlings. could admire other audience members surrounding the stage in the galleries above. And this set up a pretty strict social and economic hierarchy. Shakespeare's Globe Theater also has an app that you can download where you can actually go into Shakespeare's Globe Theater and you can see it from the groundlings area. You can see it from the gentlemen's and lowered boxes. You can see it from the stage. And I believe you can see it from backstage as well. So feel free to pause the lecture. And in the description, I believe I have some directions on how to download it from the App Store. Do know that this is only available on an Apple device. So I encourage you to download it, spend about 5 or 10 minutes in it, and then come on back. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed looking at the Globe Theater. For me, I think it was the murals that were painted in the lords and gentlemen's boxes. They were pretty amazing. Also, during this time period, if you were an actor and you went out on stage and your acting wasn't great, people would throw things at you and you'd be heckled from the galleries above. So it was not easy being an actor during this time. Next up, so a couple hundred years later, we have Richard Wagner's Bayreuth Festspielhaus. Richard was a German composer, theater director, and conductor known for his operas and synthesizing the poetic, visual, musical, and dramatic arts. This was to him a gesamte Kunstwerk, which is German for a total work of art. And he also thought of music as subsidiary to drama. He envisioned an opera house with the absolute focusing of the viewer on the events occurring on stage. So he built it. What you see here is a blueprint of it. His goal was to improve on sound, feel, and overall look of the production. So if you see, we have the semicircle seating and elevated stage connecting to ancient Greek theaters and Shakespeare's Globe Theater. We can also see a pretty huge backstage area for props and for actor preparation. Here's a side view of the Festspielhaus. So notice the height of the stage area. This was for props and other special effects to be lowered and lifted from the stage for quicker scene changes. Also, the audience arrives behind the seating area, similar to Shakespeare's Globe Theater, maintaining distance between the performers, musicians, and the audience. At this time, if you could pause the lecture again, and in the description, if you can click on the Bayreuth Festspielhaus video, this will give you a more in-depth tour of the opera house and its innovations. It's pretty amazing. So again, pause the video, click on the link in the description. And when you're watching the video, pay attention to how Wagner created a feeling of open air ambiance, borrowing from the Greeks and Shakespeare's theater, and the hierarchy of audience members. So go watch the video and then come on back. Welcome back. So what did you think? Quite a large scale work of art. I would also add that I think theater goers were pleased to sit on something other than wood or stone for an extended period of time. Not too long after that, we have the Vitascope Hall. So, almost 20 years later in America, Edward Muybridge shows what is possible with the new medium of photography by exhibiting his zoo praxiscope at the 1893 Columbia World Exposition in Chicago. We should have remembered this from the last lecture, showing that static images taken a split second apart and placed in sequence with movement on the glass disc created a moving image. Over the next 6 years, inventors experimented with Muybridge's idea and developed new camera and film technology, such as a camera with the ability to capture up to 50 images a second, developing those images onto a continuous roll of film, and the projection technology to use that continuous roll of film to make a motion picture. No sound though, we haven't gotten there yet. Early film was silent. And when I say early film was silent, I just mean there was no dialogue. There was typically um, live, a live, not an orchestra, but there was live instruments, musicians playing instruments. So most famous invention was the Vitascope associated with Thomas Edison, and you can feel free to Google that to learn more. The first indoor commercial movie theater was in New Orleans, as you see here on the right. And notice the tall ceilings and structure of the space, along with the angled seating arrangement. This layout ought to look familiar, as we just saw it in Greek theater, Shakespeare's Globe Theater, and the Bayreuth Festspielhaus. And this should also look familiar, as this is a template on which most movie theaters are based. Gone is the semicircular seating and viewing boxes above the audience, flattening out the hierarchy of social status. The focus here is strictly on the screen, and again, in the early days of film, there would have been live musicians there playing music along with the movie. So I'm just curious, if you happen to be a moviegoer when we could go to movies, where did you sit in a movie theater? Where do you prefer to sit? For me, I kind of like the middle. I don't want to be way in the back, and I don't want to be way in the front because it hurts my neck to look up. But the middle, somewhere. Feel free to pause the lecture. And in the description, I have a link to watch an early motion picture, A Trip to the Moon. It's from 1902. There's no dialogue in this movie, only instruments playing. But this is a pretty good example of the type of movie that would have been played in a Vitascope Hall in the early days of movie theaters. Also, if you're interested, you can take a look at movies from the Lumiere brothers as well from this time period. So, pause the video, check out A Trip to the Moon, and then come on back. All right, welcome back. So what did you think? Pretty interesting and a little bit out there, I thought. But if you've never seen a movie or a moving image before on screen, this would have been quite innovative and exciting to see. So moving forward in the 1900s, from the turn of the century to the 1950s, movie theater attendance skyrocketed, and motion picture studios began building more lavish, elaborate, and attractive theaters with larger screens and amenities such as air conditioning. This morphed into an architectural genre called movie palaces. So I'm sure for those of you that have traveled to different cities and different towns, you can identify these by the gigantic marquees out in front. And you can also see on the inside, these were very elaborate on the inside. There's almost like a really a huge treat to yourself to go here instead of sitting at home or being outside in the elements. Up on the top right, in 1931, a seat with a pivot back was designed to allow people to remain seated while other moviegoers easily passed in front of them, becoming the standard seating in almost all movie theaters. I don't think I've ever been in one where it didn't pivot. In 1932, color film was invented and used for cartoons and short live action films to enhance the viewing experience and to mimic real life. Then, in 1937, Disney made the first full length animated color film. Can you guess what it is? It's probably something you've seen in your lifetime. Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And then a couple of years later, The Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind were released in color. And based on the popularity and profits from these movies being in color instead of black and white, it created a shift to all color movies for the big screen. The drive-in. So the concept of the drive-in movie theater was invented in 1933 in New Jersey and reached its peak in the 1950s, 1960s. So for a drive-in, you'd pay to enter based on how many people were in your car. You would choose a spot, park, and open up your window to listen to the mounted speaker while the movie played, allowing moviegoers to enjoy the comfort of their own vehicles. Now, most drive-ins had a concession stand to get snacks and food, and some had full-service restaurants and playgrounds, shifting from an absolute focus on the screen and movie to personal comfort and family time. And now, in 2021, with the pandemic, this could be a much more popular way of going to the movies and more fun too. The television, moving along, 1950s, uh, television as we know it was invented in 1927 and popularized in the early to late 1950s with the invention of the color TV. So we no longer needed to go to the movie palace or drive-in. You can now enjoy movies, theater, and shows from the comfort of your home. Now, Richard Wagner would have hated this paradigm shift. Theater and drama productions now have to prepare the final movie or performance for viewing at home instead of a space that is designed for live instruments, performers, and the audience. The full focus and experience of theater, movies, and shows now depends on the TV and speaker quality of the home user. However, it did make visual broadcasts and shows more accessible to everyone. And look at the style of these TVs. They were user-friendly and a desired object, not just for the entertainment value, but for the style and design. They were actually a piece of furniture in your home. So VCRs and DVDs, these were accessories for your home TV. The VCR, the video cassette recorder, was invented in the late 1950s and allowed consumers or viewers to record live TV broadcasts. Let me start that again. Allowed consumers to record live TV broadcasts to view at a later time. It also allowed an easier way to copy, keep, and/or distribute copyrighted material. And interestingly enough, this wound up as a Supreme Court case in 1984, where the Supreme Court rules that the home recording of television programs for later viewing constituted fair use. Recording a program to watch it at another time did not represent any substantial harm to the copyright holder, nor did it diminish the market for the product. A very, very important court case. And for those of you that don't know, the VCR is on the left here. So those are the video cassette tapes that you would then put into the machine to play. And they were very similar to a cassette tape or film. They would damage really easily, and you could cut them, which then would render the cassette tape unusable. On the right, we have the DVD and the DVD player. This you might be a little more familiar with. This was invented in 1996 to allow for a higher image and sound quality with a more reliable storage medium. Since DVDs were nearly indestructible, they were easy to mail and resulted in the founding of Netflix in 1997. Netflix at the time, you would choose your movies on their website and they would mail you one through the mail, and then you had to return it in the mail to receive the next title on your list. Again, these were both accessories for your home TV and established distribution networks with the large movie and theater production studios to bring movie theater successes to home movie. As we move along, the 1990s to now, consumers no longer needed to leave their homes for entertainment, as it is all available through our streaming devices. So getting immediate releases from motion picture studios and performance artists right to your TV, phone, computer, and tablet. With the invention and development of the smartphone in the early 2000s, moviegoers and performing artists can now create polished content to disseminate themselves through streaming. Oh my gosh, let me try that again. With the invention and development of the smartphone in the early 2000s, moviegoers and performing artists can now create polished content to disseminate themselves through streaming services such as YouTube. And on a side note, YouTube tracked how many hours of video are watched per day, and currently it's at 1 billion hours. That's a B. 1 billion hours of videos are watched per day on YouTube. Along with, and then other streaming services, Instagram, Netflix, and TikTok. And you can publish to these platforms without the need to be associated with a movie or performance studio. So a very interesting history of theater, or at least this is how I see it in my head. So I hope you were able to follow along with that. So bringing theater all together through the lens of human-centered design. So focusing on the people, theaters focused on the audience just as much as the performers and built the environment to support both. And was this the right problem to solve? Absolutely. Building the best way through available technology and architecture to perform and entertain for the maximum amount of people in the best way possible to support the meaning of the performances for the audience. And all of these solutions became systems of seating, musical, prop, and acoustic organizations, and all are interconnected to enhance the experience of spectating the performances. And then the big picture, to entertain and emotionally impact the audience with storytelling and narrative. So we can see through the history of theater, the shift from the total work of art to the replication of real life in a moving image, to the addition of sound and color, to different technology and mediums that bring the performances into our homes and into our hands. A spectacular narrative of how we engage with entertainment and theater.